As you're well aware, I'm sure, there's been a lot of talk recently from myself and many others about the whole Counter-Strike Global Offensive gambling scandal. It has blown up to pretty big proportions to the point where the YouTubers and the companies involved can probably see them getting involved in a pretty messy sounding lawsuit. Up until now, however, we hadn't had a statement from either Valve or Twitch, as of course streaming Loot Crate unboxing and these gambling sites is very much a thing on Twitch, but now we have a statement from Valve as well as some things from Twitch as well. So let's talk Valve first, as this came from Eric Johnson, who said, quote, "We'd like to clarify that we have no business relationships with any of these sites. We have never received any revenue from them, and Steam does not have a system for turning in-game items into real-world currency." Now that is technically true. The money you have on your sort of Steam wallet or the Steam marketplace can't be cashed into your bank account. It must be spent on Steam, unless you want to get into external payments of gifting or go into a third-party site to cash it in. However, it would be disingenuous to say that the Steam credit doesn't have value, because it absolutely does. However, they did go on to say how these gambling sites work. They do indeed leverage Steam's open API so that you can authenticate your Steam account and inventory and then pull data from public profiles or use information which is manually inputted by the user. This system will also rely on automated Steam accounts that make the same web calls as standard Steam users. So it's all done, this particular part is, it's all done using Steam's API, except that it contravenes Steam's terms of use for the API, which basically means that Valve can actually start sort of counteracting the offenders. So, it's technically, using a Steam account to authenticate is fine in theory, but then, it's going against their terms of service, basically. And Johnson said, quote, "Using the OpenID API and making the same web calls as Steam users to run a gambling business is not allowed by our API nor our user agreements. We're going to start sending notices to these sites requesting they cease operations through Steam and further pursue the matter as necessary. Users should probably consider this information as they manage their in-game item inventory and trade activity." With that out of the way, let's move swiftly on to Twitch, as they have issued a statement saying that gambling sites such as CSGO Lotto are no longer welcome on the site, which is going to be a pretty damn huge blow to several streamers who did this fairly regularly. Now, there's nothing about CSGO Loot Crate unboxings here, because that's perfectly fine, that's perfectly valid. It's just the CSGO Lotto and similar gambling sites. Now, naturally, Twitch doesn't allow people to broadcast content that breaks any service agreements, and that does include gambling sites that tap into Steam's API. And they said, quote, "Valve specifically notes that using the OpenID API and making the same web calls as Steam users to run a gambling business is not allowed by our API nor our user agreements. As a reminder, per Twitch's terms of service, broadcasters are not permitted to stream content that breaks the terms of service or user agreements of third parties. As such, content in which the broadcaster uses or promotes services that violate Valve's stated restrictions is prohibited on Twitch." And to quote that famous quote, "And so it ends." Now, while these gambling sites are not going to shut down overnight, and neither are the streamers and YouTubers who made their money this way, but we're going to see a rapid decline, I think, in obviously the streaming and the YouTubing of this. And while the sites themselves will probably still exist for a while, we might see a decline there. And to be honest, I think depending on how these lawsuits go and perhaps any crackdowns from the FTC, we might see them decline as well, because at the moment they're exploiting a loophole in the law, and to be honest, that might not be the case for too much longer with how much attention this is actually getting. It's becoming more and more high profile as we discover more and more information about this whole thing. So yeah, I'm glad that Valve has finally spoken up about this, and they're finally going to be starting to kind of crack down on it, put a stop to it. And the same for Twitch as well. So a lot of people are going to be rethinking their strategy for monetization of their content, I suppose. Thank you very much for watching though, guys. I'll see you next time.